Thanks, Romer.
Let's start with your reaction to the prisoner swap that freed Brittany Greiner.
Well, listen, first of all, I'm always glad when an American's freed, particularly when they're charged with something that's ridiculous. You don't get 10 years for some hashish cartridges. Now, having said that, I think it was a very unequal and unbalanced trade. You're looking at Victor Boot, who is like a Bond villain. I mean, like a real-life Bond villain. He was purportedly selling arms to Rwandan extremists, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and then he was caught in a sting operation selling weapons. Well, he thought he was going to sell weapons to Colombian terrorists, up to 800 surface-to-air missiles, like 5,000 AK-47s, knowing that they told him that it was going to be those were going to be used to kill Americans. So he's a real-life Bond villain, and we traded him for a hashish-smoking basketball player. It's a very unbalanced trade.
So if you're president, do you not do that deal?
I don't make that
then?
deal.
You don't make the deal?
No.
You leave her in?
Well, you know, it's authoritarian regimes. We know that they're lawless, particularly Putin. He's like one of the worst guys on the planet. And when you go to Russia, you have to be, you're not going to Nebraska, you're not going to Colorado. She was irresponsible for bringing the hashish cartridges. She made herself susceptible to being used as a pawn. And the lawless Russian regime wasted no time in nabbing her because she was a celebrity. Should she have been sentenced to anything more than like a ticket and, you know, a small fine? Of course not. So again, I'm glad she's home, but I wouldn't have made that deal. Now, maybe if you have Paul Whelan in the deal as well, I'd think about it. But Paul Whelan's still rotting in a jail.
All right, so let's talk about what Congressman Colin Allred had to say
Sure.
about the Paul Whelan situation in Russia.
Unfortunately, it looks like the Russians have put Paul Whelan in a different category. They consider him to be an espionage, a product of espionage, and so they want to have a different kind of negotiation around that. I don't know exactly how that's going to look. We're trying to make him part of this package. It was, I think, reported over the course of the summer that we offered Victor Boot, who's the ultimate person being swapped here, for both Brittany and for Paul Whelan. That offer was rejected, so we'll have to come back.
So, you know, your reaction to that, because the Secretary of State said the same thing. They wanted to bring Paul Whelan home, and they were unable to. The Russians would not agree to that.
But Julie, the Russians say no the first time. Maybe they say yes the second time. Or if we just had extended it. What happens now is any American in the future that goes to Russia is going to be in more danger because they're going to probably call it the Greiner principle to say, hey, we might nab them and we might get something for them. So it's one of those unfortunate instances, and we have to consider that because Putin, again, wins on an international stage.
All right, well, let's turn to another issue in the House. The House just passed federal protections for same-sex and interracial couples. 39 Republicans voted for the measure. You voted against it. Why did you vote against it?
Well, for me, it was very easy. That's a 10th Amendment issue. Marriage is something that the states define. And I don't want the federal government in our lives. I want it involved in our lives as little as possible. And by the way, gay marriage is already legal. So what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats did is what? They make it double legal, triple legal? It's already on the books because of what the Supreme Court did.
Okay, but Congressman, if the federal government shouldn't be involved in lives as much as possible, there are people that are going to turn right around and say, so why should they be involved when it comes to Roe versus Wade?
Well, but that's just it. They decided, the Supreme Court said, the Supreme Court got it wrong in the early 70s because, again, abortion was and should be a state's issue. And it was at the time. And even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that that was wrongly decided and that it would probably be overturned because it was clearly something that wasn't mentioned in the Constitution at all, and therefore it's a state issue and not a federal issue.
Just to be clear,
Sure.
You think it should be a state issue, these things?
Yes.
And do you trust those states to provide such protections?
Well, yeah, we
protections
have
that
because we're living in
people will argue should be universal.
Well, some people would, and we argue it's 2022. And we have 50 laboratories of democracy, and it's worked very well. We're the strongest nation in the greatest republic history has ever known. So I absolutely do trust the states.
Let's turn to, you're about to take the majority in the House. Are you planning to support Kevin McCarthy for Speaker?
Yeah, so let's talk about how that process works. There's a Republican and Democrat conferences. We have 222 Republicans. We all got together and we had a nomination process. And we promise and pledge that whoever wins that process, we will go out on the floor and we'll elect. So Kevin McCarthy got 188 votes to 31 for Andy Biggs. So we should all get together, and the 222 of us should go and vote for the Republican. The reason why we do that, and by the way, the Democrats do that too, Julie, is to cut out the other party and so that they won't have any influence in who the Speaker is.
So does he become Speaker? Do you think he has support in the Republican caucus?
Well, he had 188 of them, and there's only, right now, from what I understand as of yesterday, Gromer, there's 5 Republicans that say, come hell or high water, they will not vote for Kevin McCarthy, which becomes a math problem, because then you go down to 217, and you need 218 to win. So I don't know. We're going to see how it plays out come January 3rd.
What do you think the top priorities of this new House should be?
Definitely, being from Texas, of course, a secure border. The Mexican drug cartels are running our border right now, and we have to wrestle control back. So that'd be the first thing. And then reining in inflation. It's 40-year high inflation. Mortgage rates are at a 20-year high. And one of the best ways to do that is Economics 101. Stop the trillion-dollar spending bills that are outside the regular budgetary process. And because those major bills originate in the House, that, of course, will cease. And that's going to be a good thing for the American people moving forward.
This past week, let's talk about a little bit about the Senate. Raphael Warnock. He is a handpicked candidate by President Trump. He did not win. Senate goes to 50.
You mean Herschel Walker?
Herschel Walker. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. Herschel Walker is the handpicked candidate, and he did not win. So from here, I mean, is it time for Democrats or Republicans to make a break from the former president? You're seeing a lot of his candidates did not do well in the midterm elections.
One thing we know, I think, particularly from this midterm as well, is candidates do matter. I mean, we vote a lot on ideology, but not the entire electorate doesn't. Sometimes they look at who's the most accomplished in a life resume. Who do they like the most? Who do they think is going to be the hardest worker, the smartest? And so we have to be cognizant of that, because great candidates do better. We saw that in New York. We saw that in California for Republicans. Ron DeSantis crushed it in Florida. He won by 20 percentage points. Gromer, I thought that was a purple state. You know, clearly that's ruby red business right there. So there's no denying at all that Ron DeSantis' political star is on the rise. And that's why you have a primary process. And it's like a sword going through fire. It comes out stronger. So I'm looking forward to that process. And I think the 2 heavyweights right now are Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump.
But can you beat Trump in a presidential primary? First of all, who are you supporting? Trump?
It's too early to tell right now. I mean, and having said that, President Trump's done a lot for me, and I really do appreciate that. And I think he did a great job in the 4 years he was in office.
Are you comfortable with Trump being the nominee in 2024? Will you be okay with that?
I will support whoever the nominee is, of course.
I know you will, but will you be okay with?
Absolutely.
Will that be a good situation for Republicans?
I think if it's Donald Trump on the top of the ticket, I think it's going to be a great situation. If it's Ron DeSantis, I think it's going to be a great situation. And that's why you have that battle. Now, the recent polling that I've seen, Ron DeSantis in some instances is polling better than Donald Trump. So I think that's fascinating. And again, time will tell. It's a little too early right now.
We'll see who else gets in the race. The former Vice President Pence, Nikki Haley.
Who has no chance. I'm calling it right now. Mike Pence is not going to go anywhere.
And now we cannot go any further with that because our time is up.
We can talk about this.
We can talk offline for some time. Representative Fallon, thanks so much for joining us. And still ahead, the expected agenda when the Texas legislature convenes in January.